Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Fireside Chat with Debbie Marks, and I'd like to welcome all of our guests today, and also to those of you that are will be watching the recording. Thank you for watching, and please message me if you have any questions. And today we are going to review, because many of you know Kathy Benner, but you know her from the business side. So, but you know, Kathy has a lot of other different avenues that she accomplishes every week. And so, just a reminder, she's a passive in income coach and a health and wealth educator. She is deeply committed to helping you discover a better, healthier lifestyle and a passive income option so that you can take your next best step to lifestyle living today. And Kathy's got unique backgrounds, many certifications. She qualifies her, which qualifies her to identify the right opportunities and um, and help you earn income without having to punch a time clock. Kathy has a quote that is, life is better, life is just better when we have done work on ourselves. That includes the mental, physical, emotional, social, and financial life. I think it's fair to say personal development makes you happy. You can really argue with that goal, Kathy. So I thought it would be nice to bring Kathy back and have her share with us how she got started with her B&B breakfast. Yeah, B&B rooms. And with that, uh, Kathy, um, so share with us your story behind before
Okay.
opening your B&B.
Okay. The story before the story. Yes.
Yes.
Well, I like to say that this is a dream recovered, not a dream discovered. Because when I was 12 years old, I was an avid reader. And I remember telling my mom, one day when I retire, I'm going to run a bed and breakfast. Now, the problem with that statement at 12 years old is I didn't have a clue what a bed and breakfast was. I must have read it in a book. I don't know where I got that from. Maybe I saw it in a movie. I don't know. I loved old movies. Oh, remember all those old movies they would come on? I don't know if you guys are the same vintage as me, but at 11 o'clock at night, the old movies would come on. Of course, that was past my bedtime. So I would wait until, my mom's not here to hear this. I would wait until the whole family went to bed, and then I would get back up and sneak into the TV room. And I would watch one of those old movies until like 2 in the morning. And then, of course, they had a hard time getting me awake to go to school the next day and couldn't figure out why. But and I never told them. So anyway, I loved those old movies. So maybe I saw it there, maybe I read it in a book, but I had that in the back of my mind. And in my courses that I teach, I even teach that. I even say, think back, to an earlier version of yourself and what were some of those dreams that you had? Because I think that they're kind of inherently in us, the things that our dreams and our desires and the things that we want to do. And when you're 12, life hasn't really gotten in the way quite yet. And you can kind of, remember some of those. So anyway, fast forward, I got married, then I had my daughter, and then I went, after a few years, I went through a divorce, and then I was a single mom, and, who has time to launch a bed and breakfast? I was just, trying to make the car payment and the rent payment on Friday. And so, I struggled a lot of years. And then of course, I tried different things. I was in the insurance industry for a while. But my longest stint of all of that was the hospitality industry, because in Columbus, Ohio area, which is where I am, there are a ton of hotels. And you know, and Columbus is a big, you know, Midwest town, you know, crossroads of 70 and 71. So we get a lot of through traffic. And so, long story short, it was real easy to get a job in a hotel, you know, because all the hotels were always hiring, and they always are, and they are currently. And so you can walk into any hotel and get a front desk job or a night auditor's job, or the larger ones, you know, you can get into banquets, you know, meeting space. I mean, there's just all kinds of job opportunities in the hotel industry. So I ended up in the hotel industry, and that was my longest stint of anything I've done in my life. And many of you that know me more recently think that my big stint was in the cosmetology industry. And I was only in the cosmetology industry for less than 25 years. My longest stint of anything I've been involved in is hospitality. And so when I retired, you know, I was like, oh, what would I be comfortable doing? Because once you get to retirement, you realize you just don't want to work that hard, that maybe you tried to work all your life and struggle up the corporate ladder. And I thought, what would be fun and still generate income? And opening a bed and breakfast seemed to be the ticket. So there you have it, a dream recovered instead of a dream discovered.
I like the way you put that because people don't think of it that way, and I haven't. Um, so you've had a lot of different avenues that you've worked in, you've experienced, and you you have decided, okay, Mark and I live in this great big house. What made you decide to open that B&B in your home?
Well, the biggest deciding factor was, you know, if I could, you know, kind of compartmentalize my work over the years, is that I did my stint in insurance, and then I did my stint in the hospitality industry, and then I did my stint in cosmetology. But throughout all of that, the word hospitality, you know, kind of says it all. And so my degree program, when I was, you know, getting my college degree, I chose hospitality management as my degree program. And Sally, you'll appreciate this. Actually, halfway through my program, because I was a single mom, struggling to pay for it by myself, wasn't getting any grant money, and you know, paying as I go. And so I stretched out the college over a lot of years. They did away with the hospitality program in the middle of me doing it. And so I was like, darn, I have to start over. And they said, no, no, no. We're going to take all the courses you've already taken, and we're going to roll you into travel and tourism, which is going to include hospitality. So my actual degree is in travel and tourism, of all things. And so anyway, so I did that. But once I got through the cosmetology stint, you know, that, you know, compartment of my working career, I started to not only feel like I was really going to lose the income because I was used to the income from that. So I thought, how can I make income without having to like go get another job? And because in the cosmetology, even though it was my own business, it was still a job, because I had clients every hour on the hour. I had to, you know, I had to be at the salon at a certain hour. I had to be there to do these clients, to do their services. And so it was like punching a time clock. I mean, it was my own self-imposed time clock, but I was still punching a time clock. And I did that for 25 years. And so I said, oh, I don't want that anymore. I want something that's more casual, that's more relaxed, but I can still, you know, use some of my skills. Well, I didn't really want to go out and buy something and try to give it a go. So I said to Mark, I said, do you think we could just like take one of our rooms maybe and throw it out there on Airbnb and see what happens? And he was like, what? You mean have strangers sleeping in our beds? And I'm like, well, yeah. He goes, staying in our house. I'm like, well, yeah. And he's like, I don't know about that. And I said, just one room. And I said, and if you don't like it, I get it. And he was like, okay, which room are we going to do? So he agreed. And so we got one room kind of ready, you know, And I remember I still had some stuff in the dresser, and there was still a couple of things in the closet because I didn't know what to do with this stuff. You know how you kind of expand to the space you have. So I'm like, I don't know it. So anyway, so I put it out on Airbnb, and the first couple came, and it was okay, and they were very nice, and we chatted, and and things were really nice. And so it just kind of grew from there. But I kind of had to work with Mark to get him on board. But I didn't want a whole separate money thing. I didn't want to have to pay rent on another building or make a mortgage payment on another building, or I didn't want the cost in case we didn't like it. I didn't want to have this other building that now I had to figure out something else to do with it besides a B&B. And that's why I wanted to do it in our house. Plus, I'm a firm believer that every single one of my properties has to pull its own weight. And one of my clients one time said, they said, Kathy, how are you so laid back and not stressed all the time? And I said, well, anything that stresses me, I get rid of it. Mark says, yeah, he straightened right up when he heard me say that. So anyhow, the long story short is I didn't want to have extra expense in case I didn't like it. So that's why I decided to do it in my house. And the plus side of that is that now the house generates income. So it's kind of a house hack. And
Well,
I teach that in my real estate lane. I teach, newbie investors to house hack, buy a duplex and live in half and let your tenant, pay for the whole thing by renting out the other half. Well, having an Airbnb in your home is, renting out the back bedroom for income is a great house hack.
yeah, I understand that. And I remember back then when you were contemplating it and you were then contemplating the final day of doing nails. And in the meantime, you had, if I remember correctly, you were getting it all set to start having a B&B, the room, and you fixed that up. And it was not a challenge, but I remember you were very resourceful when just setting up that first room to make sure, like you said, if Mark and I didn't like it, then I wouldn't have to worry about it. It would be easy enough to put it back in to stop doing it. So you have you actually, when you bought this house, did you have any indication or inclination that you were going to use any of these rooms for a B&B?
Well, I think when you have a dream, I think it's inherently in there, deep
Yes.
down in. And so when, I came, I through my careers, I ended up buying myself a condo. As a matter of fact, Sally lives in the complex where I started off
That's
as a
right.
single mom, and where I bought my first
Yeah.
condo was in the same complex that she's in now. And only mine was an up and down townhouse, 2-story, 2 bedrooms up, and just a townhouse type situation. And so when I met Mark and we decided to be a couple, he had half of a duplex. He was house hacking. He lived in half and rented the other half. So he was doing a house hack in his duplex. And I had the condo. And so we kind of talked and we said, well, if we're going to be a couple and live together, let's put both of our units up for rent and see which one rents first, and then we'll live in the opposite one. Well, my condo rented first, and so I ended up moving over into his half of his duplex with him. But I don't know, both of you, I don't know how maybe you can relate to this or not, but sometimes it's hard when you have her house, his house. Sometimes it's better if you just have a house that the two of you have never lived in before. And so Mark was like, well, I think we should get a house together. So we started looking, and of course, I was trying to slow down. So I really didn't want a great big house. And he's like, please don't make me live in a condo. And for those of you that have been at my house, Mark, he's quite the project guy, and he has to have some places to have his projects. Well, you can't do that at a condo complex. And so as we started looking, when we saw this one, I fell in love with the house because it was a 4-bedroom house. He fell in love with the fact it had a 5-car garage. Which, so anyhow, so that was kind of our compromise. So when we saw the house, I don't know that I purposely thought, oh, I could turn this into a B&B. But I think inherently it was down in there somewhere, you know. And because we bought it in 2009, and I can't say that I even really contemplated opening a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb or anything, a guest house, anything like that in 2009. And it wasn't until 2016, and we were getting ready to go to an authors conference. And Debbie, you've been with me there at the conference. And I wanted to do something for the conference. And so that was actually our first guest. I said, Mark, I said, I want to let some of the authors stay with us. And of course he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you know these people? And I'm like, no, other than they're going to the same conference that we're going to. Anyway, I set up, it was the first room. We just had one room out of the 4. And I actually hosted, if you will, 2 of the authors that year. And those were our actual first 2 guests. And any business that I've ever started, whether it be the insurance business, the cosmetology business, the hospitality business, I always have my first clients autograph a dollar bill, my first dollar that I made in this business. And so I had those 2 authors autograph a dollar bill, and it is framed and hanging in the upstairs hallway to this day. The
Cool.
dollar bill that they autographed. And they were my first 2 B&B clients, and they stayed, and we drove them. I mean, we went to the airport and picked them up. We took them to dinner. Because we were hosting them, we gave them the room. We drove them, you know, back and forth to the conference. And that was in 2016. And on a side note, we've hosted those authors for that particular conference every year since. And only last time we hosted 6 authors, because I have 3 B&B rooms. So we actually hosted 6 authors the last couple of years. But anyway, that's how we got started. And then after they left was when I said to Mark, I'd like to put this on Airbnb and now get a real stranger. Because even though they were strangers, we felt some sort of community with them because they were coming in for this authors conference. And we felt like we all had the same heart, so to speak. And so we didn't, it wasn't weird having them in the house, but to just have somebody off the street come in that we've never met before is where I knew that was going to be the test. So that's how we got started. And the house, really, when you said a big house, it's just 2,500 square feet, 4-bedroom. And when we bought it in 08 or 09, it only had 1 full bath downstairs, period. And so when Mark and I travel, we hate to share a bathroom down the hallway, even though the Ohio Revised Code, and we'll get into zoning here in the conversation later, but it allows for 2 bedrooms to share 1 bathroom. But Mark, he hates to have to put on a robe and go down the hall, and, you know, so he said, I think each room should have its own bathroom. So the downside to all of that is I've lost almost every closet in my house because he incorporated the closet and kind of rebuilt the room out a little bit, and where a closet would have been, but he used some of that square footage of the closet to make a bathroom in the corner of each room. So now my house has 4 full bathrooms and a half bath. And when we bought it, it only had 1 full bath, period. So yeah.
Yeah.
But that's thanks to Mark. And, you know, I couldn't have done that without him. So
Well, I have to agree with you. I don't want to put on a robe to go to the bathroom and find that somebody's already in there and I have to
yeah.
go back to my room. Nope.
Or you're in there and somebody else is knocking on the door and you're like, oh, I gotta hurry up now.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Well, and you had mentioned that, okay, so now you have this, you've taken your home, turned it into 3 rooms that are B&B, but you just can't do that. And I understand that there's zonings and things that you have to go through in order to be qualified in order to do this. So what kind of zoning and that did you have to do?
Well, before I tell you what we had to do, I will mention this. I had a little bit of a training on zoning because when I did my stint for cosmetology, I bought my own building and I had to go through the city and get it approved to be a beauty salon. So I kind of knew the ropes.
That's
And
good.
so when I went to Mark and I said, I'd like to use the house as a guest house or bed and breakfast. Um, the first thing that I did before I even brought it up was I wanted to make sure that we could do it. So the first thing that I did, and for those that are listening, every state has a revised code. And to take it one step back from there, the federal government has this building standards across the country in the United States, which is what makes our country a lot safer than a lot of other countries, because a lot of other countries either don't have any kind of codes, or they have less standards, or they have codes but don't enforce them. And across the United States, we have these building codes, and then they trickle down. It comes through the federal government, and then each state has these set of codes. And it's for everything that you have to be licensed to do, or any buildings have to be approved. And so it's in Ohio, it's called the Ohio Revised Code. So the first thing I did is I went to the Ohio Revised Code and I looked up, what are the requirements to have a bed and breakfast? And so it gave me the code number and I researched it. And in Ohio, it says if you want to have a bed and breakfast, guest house, Airbnb, or boarding house, back in the day, there were boarding houses. I remember my dad telling when he got his first job, he went into Columbus and he rented a room in a boarding house. Well, that's like a guest house. That's like a bed and breakfast. And the lady gave them breakfast every morning before they went to work. And there was like 4 men living in this boarding house. And the lady that owned it would fix their breakfast every morning. And I maybe even pack them a lunch. I don't know. But anyway, so boarding houses, bed and breakfast, guest houses, Airbnb, all of it falls under this one zoning code in the Ohio Revised Code. And then each city automatically falls under that Ohio Revised Code unless they appeal to the state to have a variance. Well, Canal Winchester had not. They had not appealed to the state to do any variance on that particular code number. So when I went to Canal Winchester, which is the city that I'm in, and said, I want to open a bed and breakfast, they immediately turned to the Ohio Revised Code to that section. And they said, well, which I'd already looked up, and they said, well, you're not allowed to have more than 4 rooms. I said, I have 3. They said, you're not allowed to have more than 16 people. I said, I can have 12. They said, you're not allowed to serve anything other than breakfast. And I said, that's my plan. And they said, and you have to have a fire inspection. I said, I would like to have that. And they said, and you have to have a health department inspection. And I said, and I'm open for that. So they said, okay, fill out this application, get your fire marshal inspection scheduled, get your health department scheduled, and we'll give you a letter of occupancy to have a bed and breakfast, guest house, boarding house, Airbnb, whatever, in your home. But one of the criteria for the Ohio Revised Code, and we'll get into this because of Columbus has filed for a variance, but the Ohio Revised Code says you have to live there because it's a residential area. It has to be your home. They don't want you to take a residential house and rent the whole thing out, like on VRBO, for example, and then your guests decide to have a big retirement party and there's 46 cars clogging up the neighborhood. And there's loud noise and there's music till 2 a.m. and all the neighbors are screaming, what's going on? Why is there this commercial, operation going on in our neighborhood? This is where our children play. We don't want to have some big commercial thing going on in our neighborhood. So that's what the code is meant to prevent. It's meant to prevent places from doing a full-fledged business. So the Ohio Revised Code is not a mystery. if you want to work from home, every industry has a section in the Ohio Revised Code. If you are a realtor, you're allowed to have your office in your home. If you are a cosmetologist, you're allowed to have a salon in your home as long as you meet the code. For cosmetology, it says you can only have family members working there. You can't hire outside, you can't turn it into a salon with outside staffing. But a mom and a daughter, or or an aunt and a niece, you can have family members work in there, but you're not allowed to. I think you're allowed to have one outside person. I think for cleaning or something, you're allowed to hire. But anyhow, the point is the code, the Ohio Revised Code, identifies everything that you can do from your home, how you can work from home. And so this is just one way that you can work from home, is having a bed and breakfast.
That is an interesting summary of what you have to go through, because a lot of people, like you initially said, when you were 12 years old, I think I'm going to have a bed and breakfast, but you had no clue
No clue.
what it was going to take to do that. Okay, so you have A, B, C, and D all figured out, and you've complied with the zoning. So now you're going to go out there and look for bookings. So typically, how do you get your bookings? And OTA, is there a certain channel? I think you call it a manager software. I mean, how does that all roll together?
Well, when I first started, I just was going to put it out on Airbnb. Now, a lot of folks, and I do want to make this clarification, a lot of folks will say, oh, you have Airbnbs. No, I have short-term rentals. And here's my analogy. Folks will say, oh, hand me a Kleenex. Well, what they mean is hand me a tissue. Kleenex is a brand name. So what they really mean is hand me a tissue. Because how do they know that the box you have is Kleenex? Because Kleenex is a brand name. Well, Airbnb is just an online travel site, and anyone can put something out on Airbnb, but it's not, you don't own an Airbnb, you own a short-term rental, and you're just advertising it on that channel. It's just one channel of many channels. Booking.com is a channel. Expedia is a channel. So you get the idea. And so Airbnb is just a channel. So you don't own the Airbnb, you own a short-term rental. And now you have to decide where you're going to advertise it. Well, the difference is this: Airbnb as a channel does not require you to show any proof of acceptance, generally. I'll have to say generally, because there are some exceptions. But they don't require, I mean, if you had a futon in the back of your garage, you could throw it on Airbnb for $35 a night. If somebody's willing to pay you to sleep on that, you can do that. Because they don't require you to show any permits and blah, 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 Well, I just threw the room out on Airbnb for that reason, because I didn't have to go through any approvals, just to see if Mark was okay with having a stranger in the house. And so we did that for the girls that we hosted for the conference. And then we did that for a couple of guests that paid through Airbnb. And this would have been in October of 16, but I knew that come January of 17, I was just going to do October, November, December. Then come January of 17, if it was going to be a go, I wanted to go through zoning and do our fire marshal inspection and our health department inspection, and make sure that we were all above board and that we had our occupancy letter. So once I did that, then I was allowed to put myself out on as many channels as I wanted, see, because now I'm approved. So from there, I added booking.com. Well, Airbnb and booking.com, they have this little hand holding that they do, that they say, if you are on both those channels, we will talk to each other in 15-minute increments on the back channel. They said, so if you book on Airbnb within 15 minutes, booking.com will mark off that room. If you book on booking.com within 15 minutes, Airbnb will mark off that room, so that you don't get double booked for the same room. Well, that first year, I just had booking.com and Airbnb, and I got double booked twice that first year. And the double booking caused so much stress because part of the criteria in the Ohio Revised Code is if you put your property out there to rent and you can't for some reason fulfill your obligation, it's up to you, the owner, to find accommodations for that person and to pay the difference. And so I started my rooms at $69 a night. And so the two times I got double booked, I thought, okay, I got to find accommodations for the second person that booked because they got booked before my 15 minutes was up and the two sites talked to each other. So they were booking at the same time on two different sites for the same room. And so I could tell which one hit first. So I had to, in the industry, it's called you had to walk a guest. So now I had to walk this second guest to another property and I had to pay anything over the $69 they were expected to pay. Well, in Canal Winchester, you know, if it was high season, even our local hotels were upwards of 130. So I had to pay the difference. So it would have been to my benefit to not even have that second booking than to have to pay, you know, the difference. So it was very stressful. And it always happened when we were out at dinner. And then I had to, you know, excuse myself from the dinner and go find a quiet hallway in a noisy restaurant and figure all this out and where I was going to send this other person and, you know, and explain to them that it was double booked and I'm really sorry. And, you know, anyway, you get it. It was stressful. So I just said, man, how do people do that? And someone goes, well, you should have a channel manager. I was like, what is that? And they said, it's just a software program that you pay for. And they said, it's not very expensive. And they said, and then you connect all your channels into this one channel manager and it talks in real time. So now when a booking comes through Airbnb, it pushes it backwards out to all your other channels within seconds. So it's highly unlikely that you would ever have a double booking because it's talking to the other channels immediately. And so now you're not just trying to juggle two channels. Now you could put 50 channels on there, or however many your channel manager will hold. And so now you can be booked as much as you want. So I was like, oh, I don't care what that costs. I'm happy because just the two times I was double booked, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that again. And so I said, I'm doing it. How much is it? $124 a month. I'm like, really? That's it? I'm like, I'm in. So now I talk to, and there's 4 or 5 little channel managers for my size, you know, for 3 or 4 rooms. And so I kind of interviewed all of them and I kind of settled into one and I chose Cloudbeds. And so the Cloudbeds rep says, well, now that we have a channel manager, they said, but we also have a front office page. Do you want to add that? And I said, what is that? And they said, well, you don't have to. The channel manager just manages your channels and you still have to go to each individual channel to update your rates. Or they said, if you want our front office, they said, you can just go into the front office and update it. And we'll even push your updated rates out to all the channels. If you want to move somebody from one room to another, we'll update all your channels. And it's just like the hotels use. Well, see, remember my background is working in a lot of the hotels and I'm used to having that computer and I just would, you know, I didn't know that that was a channel manager, the front office, but I would just, in my front office computer, I could move somebody from one room to another. Well, all the channels knew not to book that second room once I moved somebody into it because it pushed that information out to however many channels that hotel was connected to. Well, I didn't really get all of that back then. You know, back then my job was to just check people in. So now that I knew how it worked, I said, oh yeah, I want that front office too. They said, oh, by the way, if you get the channel and you get the front office, we throw in a free website for you. I'm like, how much is all of this? $124 a month. I said, all right, I'm in. So I did that. I've not had a double booking since. And so once I signed up for the channel manager, then I was like, I'm doing okay on Airbnb and I'm doing a little bit better than okay on booking.com, but I still had a lot of empty days. So I decided, you know, and I'm not very original. So I just went and looked at all the other B&Bs all around central Ohio to see what channels they were on. And the biggest one was Expedia. And so I was like, well, no reason to reinvent the wheel. If everybody else is using Expedia, there must be a reason. So I signed up for Expedia and I connected Expedia to my channel manager. Most of my bookings these days come through Expedia, because what I didn't know, that obviously some other B&Bs did know, is that Expedia was just going through a buying phase, and they bought up tons of smaller OTAs, online travel agencies. They bought hotels.com, they bought Travelocity, they bought a whole bunch of these others. And so now when a reservation comes to me through Expedia, when I open it up on my channel manager, it says Expedia, but then it'll give me a hyphen and it'll tell me which subsystem Expedia bought. So it'll say Expedia-hotels.com or Expedia-travelocity.com. So it tells me where the reservation came from. So if I'm talking to that actual guest, because they may not know that it came to me through Expedia. They may say, oh, I booked on hotels.com. What do you mean Expedia? So to not confuse them, that information passes right on through to my channel manager. So when I'm talking to the guest, I can talk their language. I can say, oh, I see you booked on hotels. And they're like, yeah. So that way it doesn't confuse the guest. So to answer your question, a channel manager is a must-have if you have more than 2 channels. 2 is even hard to juggle, I discovered. So I recommend a channel manager for everybody that's going to do this.
That's amazing. And in it, basically, the fee of the manager is what it may have cost you for those 2 rooms
Exactly.
that time. And so it is more than, paying itself. Um, so okay, it comes 5 o'clock or whatever in the evening. And so how do you do check-ins? Well, and and also including that, what are check-ins like if you're not there for them?
Well, and that was another thing too. I didn't want another job when I started this. I didn't want to have another job. And Mark and I travel quite a bit. So I get it. There are times that we roll in kind of late, somewhere. And there are times that we want to check in early if we have, an event that we're going to. So our check-in is all over the map. So I knew right away, I got on some of those Facebook groups that talk about, Airbnb or bed and breakfast, and people are, just astonishing to me. They're like, well, our check-in is from 3 to 5:30. And if they can't come between 3, and I'm thinking, what? I'm like, I'd probably skip you if I were going to book somewhere, because I wouldn't want to be tied into that. And so I wanted it to be as easy for the guest, but also easy for me. And so what I did is we added keyless entry. First of all, the first thing that we did is Mark separated our owner suite from the guest rooms. And the way that we did that is with a keyless entry. So he added doors that go from the guest parlor, the entrance parlor where all our guests come in. He added doors that go back into the rest of the house. And we simply put a keyless entry keypad on those interior doors. So it basically has our owner suite locked off from the rest of the guest rooms with an outside lock. It's on an interior door, but it's an outside lock, just like you'd lock your front door. And so the guests can come and go as much as they want in and out of the parlor. And then their rooms have keyless entry doors, and the front door has a keyless entry door. And so once those keyless entries were installed, now I didn't even have to be there. So in the morning, when I get up, the first thing that I do is, once the guest checks out at 11-ish, and I'm not real strict on their checkout time as long as they don't stay till 3. But, if they're not right out the door at 11, that's fine. I'll go have another cup of coffee, because again, it's the hospitality industry. I want to be hospitable. I want them to be relaxed. I don't want to be, hey, are you checking out yet? I don't want to do that. So I'll go have coffee. I'll just kind of keep an eye out for when I, see that they're leaving. And as soon as I know they're gone, I'll go in and flip the room, get it ready. It takes me about a half an hour per room to flip a room because I've got tons of laundry. Mark has added that for me. And so I'll flip the room and get it ready. And then I'll sit down at my computer, usually by 1, and I'll just go in and check in the next night. I'll check in all the guests. I send them a nice email right through their booking channel, wherever they booked. So again, when I type it in my channel manager, it sends it out through the channel they booked on. So if they booked on booking.com, they get their email through booking.com. If they booked on Expedia, they get their email through Expedia. So it doesn't confuse the guest. And it'll say, you have been electronically checked in. When you arrive, here is the code for the front door. Here is your room assignment. Please make yourself comfortable and check in at any time, no matter how late. Whatever, check in at your convenience, no matter how late. So they all get that message. And then as an extra step, because some folks are flying in, some folks are driving in, not everybody has their email with them when they're traveling. So I chose early on to do a little extra step. I now go into the reservation, I see their phone number, I copy and paste that same message into a text message to them. Because when they get on the ground and get their luggage, one of the first things they do is they check their phone. Or if they're in the car driving, they might have their phone over on, maps to, to find their way, but it'll pop up that they have a text message. So oftentimes people see the text message before they see the email. So that's just an extra step that I do to try to, again, to make it as easy as possible. Same message, you've been electronically checked in. Here's the front door entrance code. Here's your room assignment. I've left you some cookies and beverages in your room, and and make the temperature whatever you want. It's just like a welcome letter, and so everybody gets that. And so now by 1 o'clock, I'm done. Mark and I, we can go to dinner. We can go hiking down at Hocking Hills. We can do whatever we want because the guest is checked in. The rooms are ready, and the guest can come whenever they feel like it.
You have it pretty much down to a science. And
yeah, that over time. I didn't the first few months.
Well, they always say, give yourself a year at least to
it's a learning
implement. Find your mountains. You get through them, and then you move on. And and I know Sally will agree. You always find the smooth way to solve a problem and to keep moving. You don't get it.
Exactly. I just said anything that stresses me out, I'm going to eliminate. That's why Mark said he straightened right up. He said, I know you will. He goes, I'm straightening up right now.
Well, do you have breakfast with the guests in the morning, or do you just provide them with muffins and coffee?
Well, yeah, funny you should ask that question, because when we first started, it's like everything. I was like, I'm going to be this wonderful host and I'm going to have this big breakfast. And so for the first 6 months, it was a continental, but it was a very elaborate continental. It was like hot oatmeal and fresh bagels and the whole thing, and a whole sit down thing. And, and I had it around the table, and we'd open up the owner's suite and bring them through to the kitchen. And we'd have this, this wonderful sit down breakfast. And, but a lot of times, folks would go, we have to catch a flight. We got to go. Sorry. We got to run. We really appreciate it. And then some folks would be like, no, we promised our kids we're having breakfast with them. That's why we're in town, And so after a while, we realized we were throwing away a ton of food. Well, when my rate wasn't very high to begin with, it was like, I don't need to do all of this just to do it, just for fun. I mean, the whole idea is to create some cash flow. So I told Mark, I said, I need to start, thinking smaller on these breakfasts, because it was just too much. And so we ultimately went to a continental, and still a little more than a typical continental, but I added a baker's rack in the entrance parlor where the guests come and go. And on my baker's rack, I have different coffee pots, flavored coffees and hot water for tea and all different flavored teas. And all of that is set up on a timer. So I can make all of that at night and simply set the timer. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, it all kicks on. The house smells like fresh brewed coffee. And so before I go to bed at night, then the next shelf down, I put all of my muffins and cinnamon rolls and a fresh fruit basket, and all of that comes out. And I do all of that at bedtime. So I put all of that because most of the guests by then are already in and in their rooms. And so then I'll set that all out, and it's all covered on those cake plates, that's got the dome over top. So I put all of these beautiful cake plates out, and baskets, a big basket, a big fruit bowl of fresh fruit. And then of course all the coffees and teas are all right there. And then everything's on a timer. So in the morning, if a guest has to sneak out at 6 in the morning, and sometimes the guest will even say, I have to be out the door at 5. And all I do is I just reach in the back and flip the timer to come on an hour early. And so the coffee and everything's ready at 5. And I tell them, I go, it'll be ready for you. And then I always put some to-go cups out there, because sometimes folks just want to grab some stuff and a to-go cup and get going. And so I have the ceramic cups, but then I'll put a stack of to-go cups with the lids, the throwaway ones. So if they have to run out the door, they can take stuff with them. And I tell them, I go, take a couple extra. If you're going to be traveling, throw it in your suitcase so that you've got something at the airport. And so anyway, again, it's all about hospitality. And now I'm not wasting a lot of food at this point, because I just put out enough for the guests that I have that night. And so I can even buy this stuff early and put it in the freezer. Yeah, I can freeze. Yeah, I can freeze the muffins and the cookies. I can freeze all that stuff. And then I just take it directly from the freezer and put it out as I'm flipping rooms in the middle of the day. I take out what I need that night so that it has time to thaw out, and I have it all on my breakfast counter in my kitchen. And then before I go to bed at night, I just go in and set it on the baker's rack for the guest. And it's all thawed out and fresh, and I get lots of great reviews for that stuff.
Well, Kathy, I'm coming to your house to stay. If I
But it's
needed
very little work on my part, because see, I've done everything by 1 o'clock. The rooms are clean. The stuff is out of the freezer, thawing out under the domes on my breakfast bar in my kitchen. And then Mark and I, we go hiking or out to dinner or ballroom dancing, or, whatever it is we want to do. And then when we roll in that night, right before bedtime, I just take that stuff from the kitchen and set it on the baker's rack, and make my coffee and turn the timers on. It takes me about 10 minutes to set up at night before bedtime.
Well, and over time you get into a rhythm.
Yes.
And it's just bam, 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 done. And you go, well, So,
and Mark sees what I do too. So sometimes, maybe I'll get a phone call or something, and I'll be, talking with one of my students, or dealing with something, and I'll start to go out into the parlor, and I'll go, oh, Mark's already put this stuff out and already set the timers. Good job,
you
Mark.
have him trained well.
I do. I have him trained.
Well, we're getting short on time, and just you already mentioned that you've got everything down to a science. You know what you have to do, and it's all in place. But some people might wonder, briefly, do you have where do you get your linens, or do you send them out? And who does the cleaning? You mentioned you have a lady that comes in twice a month, and you said that also you just can run the cleaner, briefly, quickly, if you needed to. So just elaborate on that just a little bit, because like I said, we are getting short on time.
Well, when I first started out, I had some linen, because if you gals remember my story, I had like an owner's suite, if you will, up in Sandusky, and we had it set up with several beds so that the family could use it. We could go to the lake and the kids could come, the grandkids. And so when we decided to sell that, I had all of that linen. So when I first started, I didn't have to buy any linen because I had quite a bit already. But once I've been in business for a while and I want to refresh some of that older linen, I discovered that I really like IKEA. And if I'm really short on time, I can just go straight to Amazon. And, if I have to order some comforters or sheets or whatever. But I really like the IKEA because it's so cost effective. All my drapes came from IKEA. And some of my furniture came from IKEA. But anyway, when I do need to refresh, and I do refresh about every 6 months if we're really busy because stuff gets laundered every day. So it does,
Yeah.
even though it's clean and fresh, it starts to look worn. And when guests come in, something that looks worn gives them the impression that it's not clean.
Yeah, true.
And so about every 6 months, I start infusing more linens in. But I always have all the sets that I'm using, and then I have a whole complete backup set. So if I didn't do any laundry at all, I could strip all of my beds and go get my second set and remake all of my beds and be ready for guests without doing one load of laundry. So I have a
Oh,
backup set for everything.
that's
And I
good.
have one closet, which I managed to hang on to some closets that Mark hasn't turned into bathrooms yet. And I have a linen closet where I keep all of that. And so not only do I have one full set on all the beds, then I've got one full set in the linen closet as a backup. Then I have another one full third set that's still in its packaging. I haven't
Oh,
even taken it out of its packaging. So in case something would get ruined or stained that I couldn't get out, I already have a backup set for the backup set. So, and all of that is in one linen closet, and it's all color coded by room. So if somebody helps me, they know which set of linen goes into which room.
well, that's a good idea. I never thought of that. Yeah, that's a good
And
idea.
just a little side note, we're called the Caraway Guest House, which is named after the book The Great Gatsby. And if anyone has studied The Great Gatsby in school, which it was required reading when I was in school, it's a perfect example of the Roaring Twenties. But the book has a lot of color in it, in the verbiage. And so there are different journalists that have broken down what the colors are supposed to mean. And so, for example, uh, Jordan Baker is Nick Carraway's love interest in the book, and her color is yellow. So my Jordan Baker room is yellow. And then Daisy Buchanan in the book, which was Gatsby's love interest, her color is white. And so my Daisy room is white. And my Daisy parlor is white. So anyway, so my colors go with the book. So not every B&B has colors, but mine does because of the book.
Well, and a lot of B&Bs don't have a that theme. They don't
Mm-hmm,
they don't exist after a book
mm-hmm.
or any kind of actually, that's a cool idea. So one final question, which I'm sure is on many people's minds, because when you're in a hotel, you've got bad guests. So what do you do when you have a problem guest? Or have you not had any?
Well, it depends on what the problem is. Depends on the problem. I've only had a couple, and we've been doing this since October of 2016, and we've only had a couple. Early on, we had a gentleman that was, they came up from Southern Ohio to stay because he had some medical appointments. And I don't know what his medical condition actually was, but he was shaking pretty bad. Well, he loved red soda. And so the whole room was sprinkled in red soda.
Gee,
And so, yeah, Mark and I spent a lot of time on our hands and knees that next morning, scrubbing red soda out of the carpet. But again, it just depends on what the problem is. And of course, Mark is saying, don't let them stay again. And I'm like, when a booking comes in, I can't, I have no way to tell booking.com, don't let John Smith stay again.
yeah,
I
that's a little
so
hard.
so you kind of have to take your lumps. And so that's why every step of the way, once you have a situation, you go, well, if we ever have to redo this floor, it's going to be in vinyl laminate, not carpet. You see where I'm going with that? So, but
Yeah.
as long as, so you just run with what you have, and then you just make smarter choices when you have to update something. If you're going to do this, you have to be prepared to have some damages like that. And then we had an older gentleman who couldn't quite make it to the bathroom. And so we could not get the smell out of the room, and we had guests coming. And so I immediately got on Amazon and I ordered an ozone machine. Now we'd gotten the carpet cleaner, we'd cleaned everything, we laundered all the bed linens, we threw away what we needed to throw away, we did everything we could do. And but it still was just hanging in the air. We couldn't figure out why we couldn't get all of it out. And so we did get an ozone machine. And so we ozoned the house that night. And so
Yeah, I
sometimes
guess
you just got to
you
do what you got to do.
exactly. But in those type of situations, um, you wonder how hotels handle it. And
Same thing. And and
yeah,
and one thing we didn't talk about that is always a concern is bed bugs. Because a lot of these guests, they'll throw their luggage in a baggage compartment of an airplane, and everybody's baggage is all just piled in there together, and it's all on the cart together, and it's all on the belt together, and so who
ooh,
knows how many little hitchhikers move around inside the luggage when it's all piled together. And then of course the guest shows up at our place and throw their luggage right in the middle of the bed, and to open up their suitcase and take their stuff out. And so um, in the hotel industry, and here's where I had a little bit of an advantage because I had worked many, many years in hospitality management in different hotels. And so they just have a professional treatment that is just on a rotation. And so when we decided to open, that was one of our considerations, that we needed to just have a professional treatment on a rotation
that's
to
a good
prevent.
idea.
Yeah, because I didn't want their hitchhikers. I do all the laundry right off of the master suite, and I didn't need all those little hitchhikers in my laundry room.
No, because they move around a lot, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, Kathy, this has been absolutely fascinating. I hope that the readers or listeners to the recording find it just as well fascinating. Maybe it's answered some of your questions that she has discussed with us. And Kathy, you would you please mention how people can get a hold of you as
Yes.
far as just, basics?
Well, two ways. Number one, just go to kathybinner.com, and you can contact me just through the contact page of kathybinner.com, and you see my name here in the square, Kathy with a K, and Binner is BINNER.com. And if you are interested in opening a bed and breakfast or a guest house or anything like that, if you scroll down my homepage, there is a lane there for opening a bed and breakfast, guest house, Airbnb, VRBO, all the above. And just click through and just join the free meetup. You'll get tons of information just in the free meetup. But if you want to talk to me personally, just contact me through the contact page of kathybinner.com.
That's awesome. And it's nice when it's basically that easy to get a hold of someone. And
And if you
again,
want to stay at the guest house, if you just search for Caraway Guest House, will be the whole first page on Google. So just type in Caraway Guest House and we'll come up.
that's awesome, Kathy. Thank you so much for being our guest today. And I have to admit, I'm completely uh, blown away by some of the things that I did not know that go on with this. Sally, did you have any questions?
Oh, no, no. Kathy, you were very thorough.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you were. Well, I would like to say to my guests that are going to listen to the recording, please join us on Fireside Chat with Debbie Marks the second Friday of every month at 1 o'clock. And we're here on Zoom, and you don't have to go to a restaurant or anywhere to be part of our our group, and I would love to have you join us. And so thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now. So thank you again.